Alyssa, we need to meet.
You ever watch a video and in the middle of it they do this really cool transition or effect and then you can't think of anything else and ignore the rest of the contents? Hey, and welcome to Making Effects. I mentioned in a previous video that I watch Sorted Foods channel, and about this time last year they started adding this transition to some of their videos. It's images as particles dropping down onto the screen, holding, and then falling off. Sorted Food are a group of mates in London teaching themselves and us how to cook creatively. They are also no slouches in branding and visual design, so it's entirely possible they created this transition. Of course, I might be completely wrong and it's an off-the-shelf effect, but it bugged me because I was sure it's possible to do it in After Effects. And I found out it is. There's the simple way using Trapcode Particular, which is a pay-for plugin, and these days only available with the subscription to Maxon. But I was sure it could also be achieved using just After Effects included particle effects. And it isn't. At least as far as I can see. But it is possible using layers, expressions, and an expressions feature you may not have come across. Layer.index. So first things first, I'll show you the particular solution, and then I'll show you how to achieve the same transition without it. Oh, and if anyone from Sorted Food is watching, I love your channel. I really hope this doesn't turn into an Illuminati situation, as this is intended more as a tribute than anything. And if it turns out that there's a much simpler way to do this, then think of this video as an investigation, showing that there's always more than one way to do something in After Effects. Here's my After Effects comp, and I'm just using 1080p, but all the settings would work if you insist on 4K. And here's my logo. It has some transparency to it. That will make things a little harder, as I'll need more particles, but I think it looks pretty effective. Before we add particular, I'm going to go to Layer, New, Light. And I'll make it a point light, although none of this matters as the light itself will be turned off. I'm going to hit enter and rename this light to Motion Path 1. If you've seen any of my previous videos, you know I have fun with layer names, but this time it needs to be Motion Path 1, because in particular, we can create particles which will change their positions based on these motion paths. So next, hit P to expose the position properties, because I'm old and ignore the properties panel. Drag the current time indicator to about 2 seconds in, and set a keyframe. Then go back to the start and drag your light upwards. Then at about the 4-second mark, set a new keyframe, and 1 second later, drag the light all the way off the bottom of the screen. Next, I'm going to right click on the 2-second keyframe and choose Keyframe Assistant Easy Ease In. And then I'm going to right click on it again and choose Toggle Hold Keyframe. So my particles will slow to a stop and then hold their exact position until the 4-second mark. No wobbling about. And speaking of the 4-second keyframe, I'm going to right click and choose Keyframe Assistant Easy Ease Out. So my images will accelerate as they leave the scene. And all these keyframes remain adjustable throughout, so don't worry if they aren't quite perfect. Next, go to Layer, New, Solid, and make it a comp size solid. And let's be organised and hit enter and rename this to Particles or Particular, or maybe Maxon subscriptions are too expensive. Whatever helps you remember we're going to add Particular. Incidentally, Maxon, if you're watching, I do like your products, but I try to encourage people to not have to spend more money seeing as they're already paying for After Effects. Although I'm not above selling out. Hear that knocking? Yeah, me neither. That's Maxon not beating a path to my door to offer me a sweet sponsorship gig. With the particle layer selected, I'll go to Effect, RG Trapcode Particular. And I'll expand Emitter. And at 0 seconds, I'll set particles per second to 0. And set a keyframe. Then I'll jump to 1 second and set a new value to 500. And then I'll tap page down to move 1 frame forward and set the particles per second back to 0. So my particles increase over a second, then cut off. Let's make the emitter type a box. And to see what's happening, I'll turn off the light and cactus layer now. I'll set the Y position to be way above the comp. I went with -540. and I'll drop both velocities to 0. And in emitter size, I'll swap to XYZ independent. Emitter size X to the comp's width, Y to the comp's height, and Z to 0. Next, let's expand particle. Set the life to 5 seconds, and change the type to sprite. Sprites are layers which always face the camera and can have a texture set. So instead of clicking choose sprite, I'll just expand texture and select my logo layer. Set the size to 100 or 200, depends how big you want the particles to be. And expand rotation, and max out rotation random. And now, expand physics, air, and in the motion path dropdown, choose 1. And playing that back. And there you go. If you've got a few gaps, you can try increasing the particles per second, or just increase the size of the particles. To turn this into a reusable transition, go to Composition, open in Essential Graphics. Drag in your logo layer, and rename this to Image or Icon or Droppy Pick. Then expand Particular on the timeline, and drag in the particle size. If we were wanting to copy Sorted Foods transition exactly, you'd add a text layer, animate that as you wish, and add the source text to the Essential Graphics comp too. And there you go! Particle transition sorted. But let me show you how to recreate this without Particular. From the project panel, select your logo and drag it onto the new comp button. This makes a comp the same size as your image. We'll use this as a pre-comp to make it simple to swap out the logo. Now go to Composition, New Composition, and create your new transition comp. Drag in your logo pre-comp. And it's simple enough to animate this, or duplicate it manually, but that's pretty time consuming. What we want to do is use an expression to arrange copies of the pre-comp to fill up the screen. And rather than reinvent the wheel, I turned to Google and found that After Effects legend Chris Zwar had solved this problem in 2019 on Pro Video Coalition. So let's steal, learn from that. Go to Layer, New, Null Object. Hit enter and rename this to Controller. And then go to Effect, Expression Controls, Layer Control. And rename this to First Layer in Grid. Then go back to the Expression Controls and select Slider Control. And rename this to Columns. Then hold Ctrl and tap D to duplicate it. And rename to X Spacing. And again, and call this one Y Spacing. So now we've got all these settings that are really easy to change, which is important because by the end of this we'll have around 200 layers. On the layer control, select our pre-comp. For columns, I set it to 10, X spacing to 150 and Y to 75. Then on the pre-comp layer, tap P to expose the position properties, and holding Alt, click on the stopwatch. And then paste in this expression. There's a text file linked in the description below. Looking at it, we declare the first layer. Then we get this layer's layer number, its index. Clamp says, don't go outside 0 or the max number of layers. So we can't break the expression if we accidentally try to look for a non-existent layer. We set our starting positions. And then Chris uses the layers index to determine which column this layer should be in, which then determines the row. The spacing sliders come into play here, so you can nudge the particles apart based on width. This next bit of code is mine. Here we're going to control the animation speed based on the layer length, so we get the in and out points. And we work out the midpoint of the duration too, and set a pause duration, all in code. I could have used a slider here, I suppose. And now we use an if statement to check the time of the comp and use that to animate for us. If the time is less than the layer's starting point, keep the layer out of the way. But when the time is greater than the endpoint, but less than the midpoint, use the linear expression to animate from twice the height of the comp to the Y position Chris's code set. And once time is beyond the midpoint plus the pause duration, animate the layer off screen. Then we just pass the final X and Y to the position property. So that gets us this. Not particularly impressive, but watch what happens when I select the layer, hold Ctrl and tap D a bunch of times. It's not quite filling the screen, so let's adjust the controller's columns value and the Y spacing, and it's all very even. So delete all the pre-comp layers but one, and on the remaining pre-comp tap R to expose the rotation controls, and type seed random, open brackets, note the lowercase s and the uppercase R, index, this layer's index, comma, true, close brackets. This creates a random seed, unique because each layer has a different index. And now type rot equals random brackets 360. So pick a random value over 360 degrees based on the layer's random seed. And now just duplicate the layers a whole bunch. And there's nothing stopping you just making 10, then adjusting the start points and selecting all the layers and then duplicating them in batches, so you get them falling at different times to build up the transition. You can't use this as an essential graphic, at least I don't think you can, but you can save this transition as its own comp and then import it into your comps, and each time you'll be able to swap out the logo's image for your new one. If I'm wrong about any of that, please post a solution in the comments and I'll pin it. The particular solution is a lot simpler, but it was fun for me to figure out a different way to do this. Is there another way? Have you come up with similar solutions? Let me know in the comments. Speaking of which, it really helps me out if you do. All the advice is YouTube values engagement, so we'll promote my channel to others if they see people are liking and subscribing and so on. And Sorted Food, if you are watching, thank you for the inspiration for this video and for all the entertainment you've provided over the years.